Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hi, everyone. I guess we have a few people already here with us, so we might as well just get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking about protecting employees' life and health insurance across Africa. I'm Alex. I'll be the moderator for the day, and I'm thrilled to guide you through this important and timely discussion. We're going to have a few people joining us as we go, so hopefully as we get to the panel today and the speakers, we'll have a couple more people joining us. But for the time being, hi, everyone. As you've understood, main topic today, life and health insurance. And I think considering the audience today is going to be quite interested about finding out, everything around that topic, because I believe life and health insurance are not just about employee benefits. I believe they are essential tools for ensuring employee well-being, fostering trust, driving organizational success. And especially in Africa, I mean, it's a continent rich in diversity, opportunity, providing effective insurance solutions. It comes with its own unique challenges and immense potential. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of points we're going to cover today, and I truly believe there's going to be a lot of value to be taken out of this session today. I see we still have a couple more people joining. Hi, everyone. So just as we go along, we are very fortunate to have three incredible experts joining us to share their perspective and insights. We have Niel, and Niel is an insurance operations specialist at the Unisure Group. He focuses on developing international health and life insurance solutions for global organizations, including EORs. Niel's work emphasizes innovation partnerships, such as the one with Africa HR Solutions, to transform the global insurance space. So great to have you here with us today, Niel. We also have with us Mike. Mike is a senior partner at the Baldwin Group, where he leads their International Center of Excellence. He advises NGOs and international organizations in sub-Saharan Africa on creating inclusive and equitable global benefit plans. So Mike, thank you for being here, and must be bright and early for you, so thank you. And last but not least, we have Mark. Mark is a seasoned lawyer with extensive experience in legal and commercial sectors in South Africa and Mauritius. Since joining Africa HR Solutions in 2020, Mark has been instrumental in de-risking operations across Africa. And as the head of legal and compliance, he ensures regulatory adherence, strengthens partnerships, and helps clients navigate complex compliance requirements. Thanks for being here, you guys. I believe that over the next hour or so, we'll discuss the topic of risk, challenges, and opportunities of life and health insurance in Africa. And I believe for everyone here with us today, through the insights of our panel, I believe our speakers will help us explore actionable solutions that empower businesses to protect their employees and thrive in this unique market. So once again, welcome everyone. Pleasure to have you all here with us. I encourage you guys to actively participate throughout this session. We'll have live polls. We're going to have a Q&A for any questions. And obviously, we're going to have a follow-up email with additional resources, and the session recording will be sent to everyone. So just to ensure that you guys have everything at hand. So yeah, let's dive into it, guys. So I think that we are all aware that Africa is unlike any other continent, and in its diversity and opportunities. To kick things off, I would just love to hear your opinion, each of you, on what is so unique about the African market, and why is insurance important? Mike, would love your feedback on it.
Yeah, absolutely. The most exciting thing for me about Africa is the demographic boom that we're seeing. Many countries in Africa have an average age of below age 20, and this very similarly tracks the demographic boom that happened in East Asia, most places, notably China, about, I'd say 25, 30 years ago. And so what that does is it makes Africa incredibly attractive for labor outsourcing. Multinationals looking to move any sort of labor, but most notably you've got the blue collar, you've got manufacturing, and a variety of things like that that are very attractive. But also there are a number of African countries that are very high in graduate and postgraduate degrees. So the white collar work as well are leading many organizations to look much more closely at a variety of African nations in particular, especially as the relative cost of labor in historical hubs like East Asia and things like that continue to increase, where potentially the cost of labor in Africa, given the population and demographics, could actually decrease for some time. And that's the biggest thing about what's going on in Africa right now that I think is really exciting from my perspective and is a tremendous opportunity for multinationals. What do you think, Neil?
Thank you, Mike. Actually, very interesting that you mentioned the youngest, Africa being the youngest continent in the world, with, those of you who don't know, 60% of the population in Africa is actually below the age of 25. And if you look at recent developments with regards to just foreign investment coming into the African continent, there's a lot of development taking place. And the foreign investment are very heavily focused also on mineral and energy exploration. Although there's a lot of investment and a lot of interest in Africa, one of the key unique points that I want to highlight is the fact that there's still a lot of inequality in Africa, specifically if we focus on today's core theme of life and health insurance. There's a lot of inequality across the African continent, which results in a lot of additional challenges that global firms such as Africa HR face. And that positions firms like Africa HR in a unique position where you are able to actually pinpoint some of the areas and some of the issues that you face in Africa, and also find viable long-term sustainable solutions that you can implement to narrow the gap in terms of the inequality.
Thanks for those insights, Neil. Mark, do you share some of these feedbacks?
I share all of that feedback, to be honest. I think, just to reiterate, what's been said. What makes Africa unique, to me, is the people. An incredibly diverse demographic, right, north to south, east to west. The economies are still developing, underdeveloped in certain instances. I think there's opportunity there, but from my side of things, and the way I look at it is more from an educational perspective. There's typically kind of low penetration, in a lot of these markets, particularly when it comes to insurance. And I think a lot of that comes down to, particularly in the more rural areas. I think a lot of that comes down to education. There's opportunities to get out there, make people aware of what's actually available, and what hasn't been available previously, and now can be brought into the various countries in Africa. So, looking at it as a whole, Africa is a big place with opportunity, but it carries some risk, and you need to kind of mitigate those. And one of the ways that we do that is through the relevant and applicable insurance provisions. So I think we're very much all on the same page there. There's a lot to kind of focus on wide areas, but just reiterating, Africa's there, it's big, there's opportunity.
And thanks, Mark. And I think on top of what you're saying, and I'm looking at the poll right now, and I'm surprisingly seeing that a lot of the people attending today actually not only have employer-sponsored insurances, but actually have both in their personal capacities and from their employer. And I think you spoke about risk, and I do see that as well in Africa as well, with a lot of employees wanting to have their own personal insurances on top of what their companies are doing. So I think risk will be a topic we're going to be diving a lot. Guys, what do you think about the results of the poll? Does that surprise you a little bit, or are you not surprised at all? Mike, what do you think?
I'm not surprised at all, because it's pretty common for individuals, for an employer, absolutely, to offer some sort of supplement if there are socialized benefits, and then for an individual to supplement that as well makes a lot of sense. It's actually not that different. Look, I've got employer-sponsored health plan here in the States. I am an incredibly uncoordinated person, so I buy a supplemental accident insurance program just because I know I'm going to break my ankle doing something dumb. You know, the trends aren't that far off, and I think you increasingly see people supplementing what their employer is offering with their personal funds, or if they're not on an employer-sponsored plan, they're absolutely purchasing something individually.
And I also
Mark,
think.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was
go
just
ahead,
saying, you know, with employer-sponsored plans, do you see more of that coming into the market in Africa? It hasn't typically been, you know, common across Africa. Is that now matching what we see globally, or bringing what's happening globally into Africa?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And from the U.S. lens, obviously, a big one, but not the whole world by any sense. Equity and inclusion in global benefits is a tremendously hot topic. Over the last 10 years, I would say before that, it was, we've got our U.S. plan, and then we've got a bunch of locals in Africa. You know, they kind of do their own thing. And I think it's been rightly raised that many organizations at least want to provide a standard of care or a similar offering, but I want to be very careful there. Similar offering based on the appropriate cultural context that fits into the socialized system. Because everybody knows here in the U.S., we've got the most jacked up healthcare system and most expensive in the entire world. I'm not even going to go into that. But that's a problem that many U.S. buyers made for a really long time. It's like, we want the rest of the world to have benefits like our employees. Well, that just does not work for a myriad of different reasons. So we have moved to the center a bit, and it's like, okay, well, you know, we want all of our staff to have benefits for certain baselines. We want them to have some sort of, great example, some sort of base medical plan that covers maternity. Okay, that makes sense. And so organizations I tend to advise my clients, let's get to your list of 5 to 7 key benefits you want everyone in the world covered for, and we'll get to there. And that's a point where many organizations are spending a great deal of time. And obviously, you know, Africa is very difficult because you have 50 plus countries. Each one is very, very different. And the insurers can vary across those jurisdictions. So trying to cobble together a plan that meets all those needs in, say, 14 different African countries can be extremely difficult. And it's administratively burdensome. And that's one of the great things about the group-sponsored health and life plans that Africa HR has, because if you're using Africa HR across 12 different countries, there's a high likelihood that all of those individual EORs or employees that are employed by Africa HR but working at your direction can have a consistent benefits plan, making it much easier to fit into your global compensation and benefit strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And not only that, I also wanted to highlight, as per the poll, a key element here is that no one actually said they were not insured. So it actually kind of reflects as well the main topic of the day, which is the role of life and health insurance, because not providing that type of benefit to workers, I mean, Neil, this is where you're fitting right in, is that an employee not having their insurance or potential plan in Africa is going to be detrimental to the company as such in the recruitment perspective and all. I'm sure you're seeing it every day that now it's almost a prerequisite that anyone that comes to you have to go to the workers and offer them an insurance of some sort afterwards.
Indeed, and that points it links to the earlier comment that I made with regards to inequality. Specifically, if you focus throughout Africa, you have the issue that there are gaps in some of the coverage that is offered. Now, what is quite good to see, as you mentioned, is that there's 0% of the pool that's not insured, which shows that there is a more connectedness with regards to how people see insurance, whether it is from a health or life insurance perspective. And the fact that everyone that has completed the poll are insured in some way, shape, or form just shows that there's a big drive towards having your own insurance and potentially topping up what the employer is offering to you. So if you look at both perspectives, where you have the employee-sponsored plan and you have your own insurance-sponsored plan, you ultimately end up with trying to fill the gaps with either or both. And that is one of the key challenges that we faced with some of the EORs that we've assisted in the plans that we've rolled out. The very good thing, though, is that there is a very seriousness when it comes to health and life insurance, and providing not only for yourself but also for your family in the times when you might not be there or when you need care the most.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Thank you very much. And I would just love to bounce on it because you've mentioned challenges. And I think one of the main topic we're going to cover today is also the part of the challenges, the common mistakes that we often see happening across Africa from companies trying to expand and forgetting that crucial element. I would love your guys' feedback on some of the mistakes you've seen companies make when obtaining life and health insurance benefits in Africa. I mean, based on your professional experiences, what have been some of the best practices to follow in order to avoid these mistakes? Potentially, Mike, with your vast experience.
Past experience. Wow, you make me sound way too. Slow that down. I would say I started this in response to the last question. Everyone has to have the same benefits. It's just not realistic, and it is an exercise in frustration. That can be difficult in the U.S. because the 50 states are just like 50 different countries, and so there is a great deal more cultural nuance in Africa when you think about Francophone versus Anglophone Africa and things along those lines. So that approach, while it is simple and is easy to understand, just does not work. And it is an exercise. It's an exercise in frustration. So organizations understanding, hey, we don't need to do everything different by every single country, but we need to find some sort of middle ground, and use tools like international employers of record to support and facilitate that is very important. And the other one I would say is not understanding the cultural context and which benefits are valued most in certain jurisdictions. For us Americans, it's medical. It's always been medical. It will always be medical. We don't have socialized medicine unless you don't have financial needs or you're very old. So 90+% of individuals need private medical. That is not the case in many other countries. Many countries, critical illness, disability, pension, life insurance are much more interested. So for my clients, which are mostly U.S. multinationals, removing that lens and encouraging them, hey, doing it the way that Americans want it simply doesn't work, is a conversation that I have to have over and over and over again. I'd like to flip it to Neil now because he and I have actually helped. He and I have designed some products together. What's your context on this, Neil?
It's exactly what you mentioned, Mike. I think, and you touched on it, is that one of the biggest challenges that we face with some of our own EORs that we had to assist is not finding the right partners. And we at Unisure have, as our company purpose, we actually focus on providing sought after health and life insurance solutions with trusted partners. And the partner plays a very, very important role, because that partner is ultimately the difference between knowing and understanding the landscape versus thinking that you understand the landscape, but there's a vast difference between what it actually is and what you think it is. What we've particularly come across quite often is for employers or EORs looking for the cheapest option. And one of the issues with looking at the cheapest option is that you often don't understand what you're actually buying. And when the rubber hits the road, when a member needs to submit a claim, or when there's a medical emergency, or when you need to claim against a life insurance policy, the red tape that you need to go through is never ending, and you end up with an upset employer, upset employee's family. And ultimately, the point that we need to emphasize is that the cheapest option is not always the best option. So focus on the partners that you have, that you are able to leverage from in terms of know-how and information, And then secondly, when it comes to benefit selection, price is important, but it's not everything. And that's where your partner also dovetails into explaining what you are actually buying and then trying to connect what your real need is via what you can actually afford.
And Niel, I want to give a couple concrete and specific examples so people know what to look for in terms of buying the cheapest option. Very common are policies that include maternity but have ridiculously long waiting periods, like 3 years or something mind-boggling like that. So you see your policy covers maternity, and then you're like, oh wow, okay, this does not work for my family situation at all. Or another one, which maybe is particularly damaging for those who are older, is policies with complete pre-existing condition exclusions. Well, that is basically worthless for anybody who has any age whatsoever. The other, and depending on the country you're seeking treatment in Africa, for anything above let's call it a paper cut or anything along those lines, you likely don't want to be treated there. So you may need medical transport. You may need medical transport to Joburg or Cairo or something like that. Policies that exclude medical transport costs as well. Those are 3 actionable things that I would look into right away to make sure that the policy you're purchasing actually meets your needs. Anything else you feel I overlooked there, Niel?
No, I think that is spot on. And you specifically touched on something that is a key observation that we've seen also, not only in the EOR market, but also globally. And that is your rise of the connected and digital nomad. And one of the big limitations of, and for lack of a better word, a cheap policy is that in 99% of the cases, that policy is limited to the country that you're in or that you work from. And the moment that someone goes outside of that country, they're under cover, and many of these employers don't know that. So with the rise in EORs and remote work, one of the most important things, as Mike also highlighted, is the portability of benefits. If you travel to a remote area for leisure and you have an accident, the last thing you want to be worried about is, will my health insurance be able to take me to the closest center of excellence? And that is why when you look at international private medical insurance, that is one of the first benefits that you need to look at, is how portable is the benefit, that if something happens abroad, that you actually are covered and that you are taken to the closest private center of excellence.
Thanks, Niel. Thanks. That's actually very insightful, and I love that we're now touching on very operational matters. But I would love to hear Mark's perspective from, common mistakes, but more from your perspective, Mark, from a legal and compliance perspective.
Well, I mean, look, this side of things on the legal and compliance side, I mean, it's either mandatory or it's not mandatory. So employers need to understand what is mandatory in country, because I think, as has been mentioned by Mike previously, there are a number of countries that have, social security provisions and agencies that do have an element of healthcare in it. Is that sufficient for your workers? Well, okay. And that, of course, has to be paid, and that is as a standard, and we can ensure that happens. But it's what more that's required. I don't think clients and I don't think companies really realize how much more is required. As Mike mentioned, a paper cut, anything more than that, you might be in a bit of trouble, purely because of the infrastructure. So having, as Niel said, the ability to transfer and move to other countries, or if you are in another country, is important. But just, sorry to kind of put a question back onto you, Niel or Mike. Do you find the right partner first, or do you speak to your staff and understand what their actual requirements are? Do you think your staff know what they want, and then find the partner that's able to deliver, or do you find someone who can kind of deliver on everything and then go to your staff and say, hey, this is what's available?
I think it's a bit of both, to be quite honest with you. I think from an employer perspective, the mere fact that employers are engaging with their employees to ascertain and to quantify what their healthcare needs are is not only a step in the right direction, but I also do think that it's good practice. On the other side, with regards to the partner, I think that in the day and age that we live in, the access to information is exponentially higher than it was 15 years ago. So I think the process of selecting the benefits is actually something that runs concurrently. You can't do one without listening to the other, or by ignoring the other. So as a result, I do think it's a bit of both. I know it's not a clear-cut answer to your question, but I do think it's a balance of finding out what your employees require, and that also takes into consideration what they currently have, and also then looking at what is available in the market. And fortunately, with the digital age that we live in, we are all connected globally, and that makes the identification of your partners so much easier. Mike, not sure what your take is on that.
Well, it's interesting just because, I'm the lone American here, and we've got a bunch of Mauritians and South Africans. So this is good because my biggest thought from my perspective is talk to your employees and find the right partner first. And what I mean by that is organizations so often overlook the on-the-ground knowledge that they have, because any operation that has, let's say, more than 5 employees, you've got some sort of office manager or finance manager that everybody is going to with these questions. They at least have a reasonable understanding of what the market looks like. They may already have partners, and they know what the staff need. And I've seen it go wrong so many times that there's a mandate from headquarters that this is what we're going to do, and we completely overlook any and all institutional knowledge that you already have. So I think you tap your experience, and then through that experience, they likely have a partner and advisor locally that could tell you what people and partners are looking for. Now, some people will push back and say, well, if we're in 15 different countries, that sounds like we're going to be really cobbling together a solution one country at a time. And that's where being a bit more thoughtful about how do we integrate all of these? What are the 7 things we want to make sure we have covered in these countries, in each country amount to? Can we find a regional insurance partner like a Unisure that can cover all of our countries instead of just having a different local insurer for each and every one? So there are things that can be done to pull all that together, but I think organizations often overlook the institutional knowledge they already have.
Mike, your point is very interesting, because looking at the poll, it comes out that based on the audience we have today, the number one mistake that most companies make, when choosing life and health, is that one size fits all. And you just spoke about the importance of relying on local expertise, local knowledge. And I do think that maybe some of the pain points that the audience is trying to highlight is companies not doing what you're talking about and just simply going with, we have that here, let's just put it over there. And how often do you see companies try to just simply push or standardize whatever plan they have in their home country and try to force it into Africa?
So I will give the actual context of this, because I think you have well-meaning people, but for a global organization, right when they start to go global, let's say they may have less than 100 global staff. You've got a U.S. HR manager that may not even have a benefits background that just says, yeah, we're going to do whatever. Okay. And that's how that happens. We're going to do something similar. We know they need to be taken care of, but this is what we're going to do. That's one. Then let's say you got 500 global staff or so, but you're in 30 different countries. You have an international benefits manager. There is no possible way that poor international benefits manager can be up to speed on locally admitted benefits in 35 different countries. So that is what happens next. When you get, and then that is why relying on one size fit all solutions, especially from the American model, which, by the way, it's going to be medical. No matter what, it's medical. Doesn't matter what you're going to get medical. That's it. Because that's where we come from. Where this gets better is when you start to acquire some critical mass, and then organizations will say, okay, well, we want to nominate an in-country HR expert or someone with an admin and finance background in each of those countries to try to coordinate and consolidate try to coordinate and consolidate a bit better. And that is a tremendous exercise. But for U.S. multinationals, you can't blame them. We take the U.S. lens for everything else, and we have no idea what socialized medicine is. So already we're wrong-footed for the entire rest of the world. So that mistake is constantly made, and it will continue to be made simply because the purchasing decision, or I shouldn't say, the purchasing decision may be made locally. The budgetary decision is coming from corporate HQ, and it's like, this is what we're going to do. So this mistake, as I said, is made constantly. The poll results do not surprise me at all.
Niel, Mark, do you share Mike's view on it as well?
I do. I think one of the biggest problems, and points to my earlier comment with regards to don't be fooled by the price, is specifically that. On paper, companies often say that, yes, we're going to do medical, but when you ultimately get to the point where members need to start using the healthcare benefits, that's when the fine print pops up. So Mike referenced it a bit earlier, the 36-month or the 3-year maternity waiting period, which effectively doesn't make sense, or the pre-existing exclusion. That means that you can ultimately not really utilize benefits. So what we found from working with several EORs over many years is that you start with what is the minimum requirement, what's the maximum requirement. Those are your 2 products that you select, and you fill in the gaps in the middle with the help of your staff, because you need to understand what they also require. But just making a decision solely on price is often a massive downfall that will result in EORs ultimately losing clients. Mark, not sure whether you agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. Ultimately, you get what you pay for. And if you're going to go in at the base level race to zero, that's ultimately what you're going to end up with, and what your staff will then not benefit from. So, yes, it might be a factor to consider. And I'm not saying, I'm not, totally blasé about the cost factor of insurances, but often at that race to the bottom is not to the benefit of anybody involved, and will cost more in the long run.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, guys. I basically get out of it that strategic partnership is going to be a key element here, and perhaps a nuanced understanding of the market locally, and not just based on your points, Niel, not just looking at the price. I think that will save a lot of companies times and money as well. But I think one of the things we spoke about, the mistakes, I would love to dive a little bit as well, kind of a look ahead, a way forward, looking at potentially the trends and your guys' observations. What emerging trends are you guys seeing in life and health insurance across Africa? And how do you think these will shape the future of employee benefits? Mike, would love your perspective from an American point of view, obviously, as well.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to punt this over to Niel really quick, because it's a great question for him. The demographic trends in Africa are mind-bogglingly attractive for insurers. When you look at an average age of like 23 or whatever, those are people who pay their premiums and don't have claims. So what does that mean? You've got underwriting profits. So you've got insurers like Unisure continuing to not only write in Africa, they are building on their capacity because the business is profitable. And this is very good, because they will continue to invest in Africa. So I think we will see more availability of coverage, more robust coverage, and then wider geographic scope. But Niel, over to you, because you see much more behind the curtain than what I do.
Thanks, Mike. Very, very much focused on technology. If you take a step back 15 years ago and you look at just the penetration rate of smartphones versus what it is today, one of the trends and observations that we've had is that you're now dealing with a very informed, connected, technological savvy consumer. And the time has gone where you have someone that is willing to wait X number of days for feedback. studies have shown that the younger generation want their access to information immediately, and they don't want to wait. Linked to that, you also have your health technology. A lot of it is very focused on self-diagnostics and preventive care. You can focus on things like telemedicines and the fact that you don't need to get into your car and drive to a doctor anymore. You can do that virtually. So from a healthcare perspective itself, a lot is focused on health technology itself and what is available to the connected consumer. But then also from an administrative perspective, and I think that also speaks to Africa HR and many other ERRs, in the sense that your admin burden in getting a global health or standardized benefit package must not only be attractive from a pricing and a benefits perspective, it must also be attractive from an administration perspective. Because ultimately the solution that you offer to your employees must be one that actually makes their lives easier. You don't want to end up having to deal with 50 different insurers in 50 different countries. You ultimately want one insurer with a standardized benefit package that you offer to all your employees in your 50 countries, but that is heavily driven by how you can deliver from a technology perspective and administration perspective. The easier it is for an employee to enroll on benefits and to access benefits and to have access to information, the better it will be from a satisfaction and an employee retention perspective. Mark, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Neil, I think what you said about the telemedicine and self-diagnostics is definitely coming more and more through. And that type of technology, I think, is well placed in Africa, where the resources locally or in the jurisdiction that you are might not be available. So there's definitely scope for that to develop. And I think, as we've seen in kind of various other elements, you mentioned the smartphones, but with things like mobile money, the people of Africa are early adopters and fast adopters of that particular type of technology, particularly around smartphones and what they can do, and having that. Whether it's an app or interface in some other way, shape, or form, is definitely coming more and more prevalent and will be used more and more by the people here. So those are definitely things we can get behind and support.
There's something Neil brought up, that we're talking about administration, and we've been focused, rightly so, on employee experience almost this entire time. The other thing about technology is ease of administration on your organization. Obviously, the most locally well received would likely be to have 15 different local plans in 15 different countries. That is, as we talked earlier, is an administrative nightmare for U.S.-based HR buyers and international benefits managers, and it's why they hire people like me to help them figure it out. But if you can find an insurer, or if you can find a solution with someone like an Africa HR, or a regional pooled solution with someone like Unisure, Neil's not touting his own horn appropriately. Your insurer may be willing to build bi-directional APIs, application protocol interfaces to your system, to make data upload and download seamlessly, and to very much provide an almost entirely digital process for you on the back end. So, and this is big in the US, if you're looking for HRIS or benefits administration system integration, you're absolutely not going to get that from a local African insurer. And this is going to mean a much easier experience for you as the benefits administrator, HR manager, VP of people, but also it's going to mean a much better experience for the people, for the population, which are now becoming, to Mark's point, ravenous consumers and users of technology.
So basically, whoever is not settling themselves with technology is going to miss the boat and going to be suffering with administrative burden, basically.
Yes, and to give you an example, the Kenyans spend more time on social media than any other country in the world, and there's a number of other African countries that are extremely high on that list. So they absolutely They absolutely want to consume mobily if possible. And as Niel indicated, there's a variety of insurers, Unisure included, that are very much leaning into that to make that as accessible as possible.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you very much for that, Mike. I think based on this, it's quite clear that as we're going to start diving into, the different African countries, different legislations, but also different requirements, and I'm top of my head thinking about Nigeria and the different regions and how you can't necessarily access every region the same and all. I think tech should be at the forefront as well of what's going to happen with health. And I'm sure I've seen the Unisure platform at work. So I know that the guys at Unisure are working hard to make sure that everything is being connected. But it's interesting. Mark, from your last kind of final point on the trends, are you seeing as well more, we're going to say, governments coming in trying to protect their workers? As I know now, we have WIBA, workmen and all. Are you seeing more countries nowadays wanting that additional protection being mandatory in country, or how do you see things unfolding?
I don't see it as governments necessarily, wanting to ensure that certain policies or requirements or insurances are necessarily in place. I think traditionally, and if you look at kind of Africa, that's always been a thing. So I think I mentioned earlier there are a number of countries that do have mandatory social security contributions that have elements of health and life cover and all the rest of it in it. Sure, I think would, and I don't see why they wouldn't want to push this kind of thing, because especially on the private side of things, because it would lessen the burden somewhat down the line, but you're talking about 54 countries. It's got a wide range of legislations, and some are more mature than others. And as we all catch up and kind of get to a level playing field, you may see some developments in that respect, pushing mandatory insurances. How they would do that more would probably be through Social Security. I am aware, obviously, that some countries do mandate private medical cover, and life cover, but whether that would be their ultimate goal, probably not. I think it would still be up to the employer for a long time to make those decisions and to provide this kind of benefits for their employees, and ultimately they're going to have to if they want to attract talent. I think that's probably a big thing, because if company A is going to do it and company B isn't, guess who's going to go work at company A? I think that's probably more along the lines as opposed to a government-led kind of project.
Thanks, Mark. And I guess I will throw in my little question to everyone here, because although we're talking about trends, I'm curious about a topic, because listening to all of you guys also makes me realize, in terms of education of the prospects, of the clients, how, and perhaps to you, Mike, to you, Niel, on that front, from a client perspective, how much education goes into you guys trying to make them understand across Africa, that mandatory element, that protection element, and that why it is mandatory and enforced by law, or how much education goes through what you guys do on a daily, trying to get that across, that it's not something that is, standard as what you would have outside Africa in general. That educational aspect around it, how much time do you guys spend with your clients on it?
A massive amount, I'm not going to lie to you, but it extends beyond just the client. And when I'm referring to the differentiation between the two, is it's all fair and well that you talk to the management team at a company that is taking out your health or your life insurance policy. But there's an additional step that you need to focus on, and that is actually the education of your members. The members need to understand that how certain things work, what is good, what's not good, how do you access care, and so forth. And one of the biggest challenges that we've had is that you can't just slap a membership guide in front of a member that has never had health insurance or private health insurance before and expect that member to understand exactly how the policy works. So one of the key focused areas that we've had with Africa HR was to position your marketing and your education material in such a manner that it's easy to understand. Not all employees, not all insured lives are insurance experts. So the moment that you start talking about specific jargon like moratoriums and pre-existing conditions, it becomes very difficult ensuring that your member actually understands what benefits they have access to. And what we found with regards to instances where members don't understand their benefits, it's either you're going to have an upset employee that complains because they are not able to access care, or you're going to have the inverse. You're going to have an employee that just doesn't use benefits. And it ultimately defeats the purpose of actually offering those benefits. So I think the education piece goes beyond just where you educate your corporate client and the management team taking up the cover. It also should filter through to the employees and their dependents itself. And the easiest way to do it is to ensure that you need to position your marketing material and your educational material in such a manner that it's easy to interpret and that there's no or very limited ambiguity with regards to the interpretation of benefits. Mike?
Yeah, Neil, I think you said it very well. I think at the U.S. management team level, there's very little bandwidth or receptivity to understand better. I think even for the operative points of contact, say HR directors and even international benefits managers, they seek to understand more, but the real institutional knowledge needs to be provided at the country level to those key points of contacts, or potentially, to Neil's point, with the individual members.
Thanks a lot, Mike, for that insight. I think that's those insights were quite fascinating. I certainly was not expecting tech to come out so much, but thank you for that last point. That was very personal of me. So thank you very much, you guys. I think now we're going to deep dive into the kind of like the final point, which is going to be about key considerations. I do believe that we're going to have a poll right now around, what are the most important reasons to offer life and health insurance benefits to employees in Africa. Hopefully we get some insights from everyone, but I don't want no cheating. So that's why we're going to do it before and not when you guys are going to provide them with all the answers. I think we've covered a lot of different topics that have basically given the answers to the audience regarding, considerations when trying to offer life and health insurance. But to wrap up today and all the insights you guys have given and that discussion, I would love to just touch base on the practical. What are the key considerations for employers when offering insurance benefits to African workforces? Mike, from your experience?
I'm actually going to go back a half step, and one of the things I will talk about one of the actually, I think, bad things that employers of record have done for clients is I think they have made organizations lazy. And EOR allows you to get to work so incredibly quickly that organizations often bid and win new business, and then they're working within a couple of weeks. The problem is there has been no thoughtful consideration as to how this impacts an organization's global expansion strategy. Should I form an entity in Zambia? Should I not? What do I know? How much is it going to cost me to maintain an entity? Well, depending on the country, it's going to cost you between 30 and 100,000 USD equivalent a year to do that. Okay. Well, we're going to be there for a long time. Okay, that's good. How long is a long time? When we leave Zambia, well, we need to wind down the entity. Enjoy that. That's going to take 10 years, and you're going to incur costs the whole time. So it's how is the employer of record the best tool in my toolkit, and how does it fit into my global expansion strategy, and how does that fit into our culture and our mission around equity and inclusivity in global benefits? So I think EORs are such a fantastic tool, and they allow people to get to work compliantly so quickly. It allows clients to skip a few very important steps when they are thinking through their international expansion strategy. Case in point, I've got two clients that I'm working with right now that have become so addicted to using international employers of record, they have different EORs in at least 12 different countries. And now they're like, this is miserable. Can you help us figure this out? Can you help us consolidate? And can you help us find a more well thought out strategy? They're like, we were growing so fast for so long that we just did what we had to do to win the work. And so I think the consideration is you should absolutely, to Niel's point, have your preferred international employer of record partner, and then rely on them. Rely on Mark and his team to understand the legal and legislative landscape that you're entering. Develop a multi-year plan as to what you want to do. I mean, I think there's a lot more resources associated with the tool. And Mark, it would probably be good, for you to provide some guidance here as to how you get granular with clients on these types of things.
Yeah, I mean, look, it comes from years and years and years of poring over various pieces of legislation and understanding from the teams in country that we have any particular changes or what the market's doing. We are lucky that we've got a very established kind of network of partners and teams throughout Africa who are able to provide us with on the ground, information and almost real-time changes, and developments as they happen and even before they happen, which allows us to put together our knowledge base or grow our knowledge base and make the necessary adjustments as they come. Again, given that it is such a diverse jurisdiction and geography, we're never going to be 100% on top of everything all the time, knowledge-wise. Changes happen, and I think it's just important to keep educating both ourselves internally and then thereafter clients, and it's perhaps taking a step back from a client perspective, and the fastest route to market might not be the best route to market. Maybe I take an extra day or two and sit with us and sit with your key account managers that handle this from our side of things and really deep dive into it. I think it's important to get the information up front, and if you have a question, ask. I think perhaps the important thing to say is don't assume. Mark, you've said kind of multiple times, what happens in America, how it happens in America, and the client is in America, and they might make the assumption. So from our perspective, we always try and educate clients about that kind of thing. Don't make those assumptions as a client. It is a different jurisdiction to consider, and even within Africa, it's a different jurisdiction. It's not one big landmass. So internally, we have our team. That sets out, researches these things. We rely on good partners as well to get the information, and then communication is key in getting that across to a client. So when the clients come in and they say, hey, they want A, B, and C, for us it's not just, hey, let's just sell that off and here we go. It's, well, why are you looking for A, B, and C? Do you perhaps need X, Y, and Z? And just understanding client needs, and then being able to, once you've understood that, actually deliver a proper solution for them.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Niel, what are your takes on all this?
Yeah, I think to latch on to what Mark mentioned, one of the key components that we've just from an operational perspective came across several times is that the fastest route to market is not always the best route, as Mark mentioned. And we often, when we started working with our first EOR many years ago, we tried to be everything to everyone. And ultimately, it ends up being a very fine balance between what you are promising and what you are actually delivering. So the importance of understanding exactly what the need is, and also taking a beat, like Mark mentioned, maybe take that extra day and rather get the full information before you make a decision. A practical example, for instance, when you look at technology and specifically onboarding, we have a range of options and solutions available that we can offer to EORs, from being the full bell and whistle where you integrate with APIs, passing info up and down, and it looks extremely nice on paper, but the actual method and the time that it takes to implement it defeats the purpose of having the integration at all. So you need to focus on a broad range of operational solutions to ensure that although you have the end goal of having the full bells and whistles, you also understand that you might not have the development resources available at that point to implement it. So as a result, and to emphasize what Mark also said, is rather take the stepped approach, take the team with you, and if you take the team with you, you go far. And that is something that EORs also need to understand, is that we can't select the benefit today and implement it tomorrow for the sake of implementing it. Rather do the stepwise approach where you do what is pragmatic and what you are able to do as an EOR from a resource perspective, and then build on that as you go along. Ultimately, if using Mike's example, if you scope too quickly, you end up with 15 different EORs, and you are effectively just recreating the problem that you had before you started with the first EOR. Mike, not sure whether you agree with that.
I agree, Niel. That's my exact argument. I think it's becoming increasingly easy to get to work almost immediately, and that creates showing restraint in those situations creates a variety of challenges in and of itself.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. I'm quite mindful of time because we have 4 or 5 more minutes, and I do believe we have a Q&A as well. So let's perhaps welcome some of the questions from anyone in the audience following all the different insights and points you guys have mentioned, and then we'll be delighted to deep dive into them. So let's see the type of questions that we're gonna have today. So anyone, please feel free to reach out and leave us your comments right now. I'll give everyone a minute or two, so that way we're gonna have all the different questions. And by the way, just going back to the poll we had previously, without surprise, I think supporting employee well-being is the one thing that matters the most. I was hoping so many of everyone was going to say protecting the company from legal rights, because I was hoping that's what everyone was worried about, but I'm afraid it's not. So all right, great. All right, so we have let me look, because we do have a Q&A section, so let me deep dive into some of the questions we have here today. So one of the questions that we have from a member of the audience is, how can small companies and SMEs make life and health insurance accessible to employees? Mike, perhaps?
That's a pretty easy one. I would say using an EOR is a fantastic way to do that, because by plugging into an employer of record like Africa HR, your organization gets access to a much larger pool than you would otherwise be able to secure on your own. And to get a bit more granular, Niel knows this as well. If you're looking for a local benefits plan, certain countries, you may not even be able to get a group sponsored plan until you have at least 10 individuals. So it is particularly difficult for the SMEs that may have one, let's just call it less than 5 per country, to find something reasonable that is what we call locally admitted, to use the insurance jargon. And that's where an employer of record like Africa HR, or potentially a pooled program across a regional program across multiple different countries through someone like a Unisure, could be highly valuable.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you very much. And I'm mindful of the time. There's one more question that keeps coming in the Q&A. Is how can tech support life and health insurance in remote areas in Africa? And that notion of remote is coming up quite often. Perhaps Niel, from your own personal experience, any tech related or innovative approaches that you guys at Unisure have done to be able to access those remote areas?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think one of the biggest things relates to your smartphone. People often underestimate just how powerful a smartphone is, and one of the innovative solutions that we've implemented is the fact that with the solution that we're offering to Africa HR, you have the ability to do a real-time check of what the closest provider to your physical live location is. And what makes that quite beautiful is that in the event of a medical emergency, you don't have to go onto a website and go and check what is the closest hospital to me. All you literally do is you take your phone, you do a live pin, and you enter your criteria in terms of whether you're looking for a hospital, whether you're looking for an optometrist, whatever the case might be. It links in very closely to the earlier comments with regards to the accessibility of information. And the fact that we can now real-time pinpoint exactly where our members are makes it a whole lot easier to get help to them where they are, irrespective of how remote the area is. So the point that I want to make is the capitalization of technology and the fact that you make your information and your benefits available to your employees at their fingertips via their mobile phone.
Thanks, Niel. Thanks. I'm also very mindful of time, and I wouldn't want to run over. It's been a great hour. So with that Q&A and those answers, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, Niel, Mike, Mark, for your invaluable expertise, and also most especially with all the advices you guys have given today. I think we've explored, the unique challenges of the African market, kind of uncovered some common mistakes to avoid. We've identified, I think, emerging trends and practical considerations for employers. Thank you for your insights. To everyone that was attending, and on behalf of Africa HR, thank you for joining us today. A special thanks to you guys once again, to Mark, Niel, and Mike. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the expertise. And thank you to the audience for being game and for thorough participation. Thank you to everyone. We'll be sending out the recording of this session along with additional resources. And don't hesitate to share your feedback. Mike, Niel, Mark, any last final words for you guys?
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you. Hope the content was meaningful, and thanks everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Maybe just to echo also what Mike said, it's a privilege and thank you for the opportunity. And to our guests that attended, thank you. And please do feel free to reach out to us. There's a wealth of experience on the school, and we are always there to assist with challenges with regards to health and life insurance, and looking forward to dealing with you.
Thank you very much, guys. Mark?
Yeah, no, just from our side, thanks for the opportunity to help educate those people that are out there. It's always good to learn from others. So, anytime, let's do this again if we can. But as Niel says, let's continue going and reach out if you need anything.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Once again, thank you to everyone. Have a great day, great evening, and looking forward to the next one.